5 o'clock and the cameras are rolling. So I will call to order the February 11th, 2020 meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. I'd like to start with two announcements. The first is that this meeting is being both audio and video recorded, and that Chairman Daniel Drake is participating remotely as his physical attendance is unreasonably difficult. As such, all votes tonight will be taken by roll call. With that, we'll move on to the agenda that's before you. Do we hear any comments or concerns with the agenda? Hearing none, that will be adopted by consent. We have the draft minutes for the January 14th, 2020 meeting. Are there any concerns with those minutes?
No.
Those will also be adopted by consent. We have to ratify the January 22nd, 2020 and the February 5th, 2020 warrants. Is there any discussion or concern on the warrants?
No.
Is there a motion to ratify?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Hearing that we have a motion made and seconded. Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Drake?
Aye.
And Chairman votes aye. That'll bring us to the public comment portion of our agenda. Is there any public comment for items that are not on the agenda tonight? Hearing none, we will move on to the public hearing to consider the proposed revisions to the airport's rates and charges. And I have a small statement to make as we open that public hearing. The public hearing for February 11th, 2020. Welcome. This evening we're holding the public hearing on the proposed changes to the Nantucket Memorial Airport rates and charges. The Nantucket Memorial Airport routinely reviews and updates the rates and charges assessed to airport users. The goal in establishing the fees is to provide fair and reasonable rates charged on an equitable basis to recover the costs associated with the operation and maintenance of the airport. The airport faces a number of capital improvement needs in the next 5 to 10 years. Infrastructure is aging, federal grant funding is decreasing, and the costs of municipal construction on island are substantial. In order to maintain economic sustainability, where airport users bear the costs for operating the airport in proportion to their scale of impact, a carefully managed rates and charges structure is essential. The current revision is part of an ongoing effort to identify and compartmentalize the actual costs of operating airport lines of business and to align charges with the sponsor's philosophy. Proposed revisions to aeronautical rates remain lower than industry comparable airports and competitive for non-hub and small hub commercial service airports. Highlights of the proposed revisions include a 5% across-the-board increase to landing fees, with the notable exception of transient GA aircraft less than 6,000 pounds mean takeoff weight, to which there is no charge, maximum takeoff weight. A staggered increase to general aviation ramp fees, whereby ramp fees for aircraft with larger footprints are escalated at a higher rate than smaller footprints. An increase to vehicle ramp access fees for the southwest ramp. And notably absent are the lack of increases to hangar and tie-down rents. And with that, we'll consider this public hearing open. Is there anyone who would like to, from the public, who would like to make a comment on the proposed rates and charges? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing for the proposed revisions to the rates and charges and open it up for discussion by the commission. So, Mr. Rafter, would you like to?
Well, I think you've covered it very well in your summary. There are a couple of items I think we're looking to make a slight modification to, and that is on the violations for the automobile parking. It will be a straight $50 per day for all areas. So we're going to consolidate all that into just one statement, essentially.
Okay, is that agreed by everybody by consent? I believe that's what we had talked about at the previous meeting. It just didn't get in this.
Didn't get it into this version.
And I had one other item that sort of a last second, but not necessarily an actual change to rates and fees. But I think that the town is looking to operate a shuttle service between, the airport, two fairgrounds, and downtown. And if we were able, as to come up with as a sort of a future project, a way that there could perhaps be some sort of a discounted structure if someone's actually using the shuttle and parking at the airport to go to town. So I think that's a to be determined item, but I did want to mention it sort of last second. I wasn't sure whether I should do it under this or commissioner's comments, but since the parking is part of this, I did want to bring that up.
I had a question, and it's probably simple. Vehicle parking, I see $120 weekly. Is that for the whole week of parking or nightly parking? It's someplace on there, and I'm sorry I didn't make note of the page.
And I'm going to answer this, but no one knows more about this. It's a charge for the full week.
Right.
So in other words, if you're the daily, it's a discount from that. You're not paying the full.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments, discussion from the commission?
No.
Staff? Mr. Rafter?
I'm fine.
Is there a motion to?
I'm sorry, before you do your motion, I just want to make sure. We can add, and what we'll do is we'll put in either, just label it as a NERDA rider discount or something like that, to be determined. So
If that's amenable to all?
I would just ask to
No-
include that in
no
your
objection.
motion so that we do it that way.
Yes,
I
please.
apologize. I do have one more question. I can't read my own writing. How do we know if Lyft and Uber to collect when they're dropping off? There's something about their charge that they do. How do
At
we
this point in
track that?
time, we're unable to charge them because of the state law, but we're working with our state representatives to have that law modified so that we can collect from them.
Okay.
Typically, the way that would work is that the company then either reports directly to us or a third party and gets assessed the fee.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to adopt or the rates and charges as proposed and amended.
So moved.
I'll second. I think that
Uh,
might just need to be more, do we know exactly what those changes are? I know it may not need to exactly be in the motion, I just want to make sure it's clear.
Mr. Viscarin, would you like to elaborate on your motion?
If I could, if you don't mind, I can help, I think. So I think the two items we discussed were consolidating the parking violations into a $50 per day in all areas. And the other was adding a NERDA passenger discount at a future date to be determined.
For parking, if they're parking.
If they're parking at the airport, yes.
Right. Is that your
We'll
motion?
We'll include that in the
I'm sorry.
motion. Thank you, Tom.
And a second,
I'll
holds.
second that.
Mr. Viscarin,
time.
how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Drake?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. Thank you. Moving on to pending leases and contracts as set forth on Exhibit 1. We have, I'll turn it over to Mr.
have-
Rafter if you'd like to.
Have an agreement with Act Surf School. It's a $1,500 business fee. It's the annual recurring surfing lessons that are done down on the beach. We also have a contract with Jacobs Engineering for $41,202 for design and project administration for the pavement markings. And the third contract with McFarland Johnson currently is pending. We're just awaiting a final signature on that, but that will be before you at the next meeting.
Any questions or concerns with the pending lease agreement and the contract?
No, I have a comment that Act Surf has been doing this for years, haven't they?
Yes.
Yes, so,
Without complaint or problem for airport
He
staff?
does a very good job down there.
Great.
He actually kind of is some of our eyes and ears too, so he helped us out.
thank you.
So we'd entertain a motion to adopt the agreement and the contract
I'll make that motion.
Second?
as put forth on Exhibit 1. Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Viscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Drake?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. Moving along to pending matters, we have the crew quarters development that has been a continuing agenda item. Mr. Rafter, do you have anything to report?
Yes, and it's going to be discussed further at a subcommittee meeting for the Long Range Planning Committee. And at that time, we'll be looking at the cost for one building, which would be 2 units, financing mechanisms, and where it may fall in on our priority listing of capital items. Also on the 17th, I had the opportunity of touring the community sailing facility. It's on West Creek Road. I believe it houses about 17 people, mostly dormitory style. It was built for, I believe, $1.4 million. Very nice building. I would say it's probably the equivalent of the size of building that we're talking about. They were fortunate enough to have a lot of donations, so their price is a little bit lower. And they also don't have to go through a lot of the things such as prevailing wage and other items we would have to. But they did make a very strong argument for stick-built construction, because as the young lady said, if you have a problem, you have a contractor that you call and they come and they fix the problem. But very well constructed, very nice facility. And interestingly enough, she indicated that they are saving a lot of money even though they only use the building 3 months out of the year, because they were paying rents before, and they're paying very high rents. I toured the facility with 2 items in mind. One was, again, looking at it in comparison to cost and size of what we're projecting, but also for some of our seasonal employees, we house in the Thompson House. Our season is getting longer and longer, and we don't have heat there. So when we get into the October, November, December timeframe, we don't have the capability of providing housing. So they said that they would consider seriously looking at, maybe renting us a room or something if need be, but we'd have to work out those technical, arrangements. So again, very nice facility, very well done, well built, well designed, nice layout, everything. On the corner of West Creek and, right across from
Pleasant Street.
the old
Pleasant Street.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would dovetail with our needs for extending the season, because they're done by Labor Day, or even before that.
Right, so that helps us, as our season extends, and it'd be very nice to be able to be in there, so.
More to come.
Yep, we'll be discussing that in further detail at the Long Range Planning Committee. On the Town Government Study Committee item, the warrant article is, it's in the warrant, the article, it's article number 94, no other changes on that. Do you want me to continue on the agenda?
I just quick on the Government Study Committee. Have we received a positive recommendation from the Finance Committee? Or are they still discussing that one?
I think they're still discussing all of them, but I have not heard anything negative back from them, so.
Yes, if you would please continue if nobody has any other questions on that item.
We've prepared 2 RFQs, requests for qualifications, one for engineering on-call services and the other for planning on-call services. And we'll be issuing those shortly, but we'd like to have a representative from the commission on the evaluation committee. So I will ask the chair, vice chair to handle that accordingly. You don't need to, you can either tell us, take a vote tonight or decide, or let us know at a later date. But those proposals will most likely be doing around March 15th to the 17th. So we have a little bit of time, but we would like to have a representative from the commission on the evaluation.
So how many different RFPs are involved, Mr. Ray?
There are 2. We're looking at one for planning and one for engineering, but we're most likely going to be selecting 2 engineering firms.
All right. Well, why doesn't anybody who's interested in serving on one of these 2 evaluation committees, I don't think they have to be formally appointed by the commission. So why don't anybody who's interested speak to Mr. Rafter at the end of the meeting, and if we have so many volunteers, then we'll have to make some decisions. But
we get too many volunteers.
I think it'd be great if people would like to do these.
Okay,
Okay.
sounds good. I did it last time. It's a lot of reading, for sure. I'd be happy to do it again, but I'm also happy to defer and we can work that out.
Yeah, we can split whatever.
I could probably do that.
Yeah, it's,
All right, I'll be in touch with you and we'll work out the details.
Good.
Thank you.
moving on to finance.
On finance, before I get into the second quarter update, I just want to let the commission know that Jamie's in the process of preparing budget transfers that we're going to have to send downtown that we do at this time of year all the time. And again, it's just to balance out the operating where we're going to transfer from one account to another. And she, you know, it's, I don't want to say it's a last minute, but it's a short time period because she's always waiting until she gets in the final reimbursements from our grants. So I'll make you aware of exactly what they were, but the town, they have to get to town pretty soon, so we'll send them out to you as soon as we have them. On the second quarter update, year-to-date revenue is up 2% or $281,000 over last year. PFCs were up $88,000. The FBO was up $120,000. And there was a significant increase last year in the other income that was associated with the reimbursement of the baggage belt that was installed back years ago. We're hearing that there's a strong likelihood that we may get another shot of the reimbursement because it was only percentage last time. But my understanding is Congress has language in bills that will allow it to continue for the next fiscal year. On the expense side, year-to-date operating expenses without debt service are down 2%. Payroll and fuel are down. And again, that's the fuel drives the revenue as well. The administrative costs are increased primarily due to legal fees and some software programs that we added. A training one as well as our point of sale FBO. And if you look at the summary page, at this point in time, our fund balance is about 5.8 million. But I will caution you that that drops as time goes on and our cash flow isn't as strong in the next quarter. So by the end of the year, it'll be down a little bit from that. And other than that, I don't have anything else to report on the second quarter. Any questions or?
Anybody have any questions on the second quarter report?
Yeah, I had one question on the fuel sales. We're somewhat behind. Is there any realistic chance of making that up by the end of the year?
If I could predict the traffic, I'd say yes, but I think what we're seeing, Dan, is it's the traffic's not there, but the uplifts, if I'm not mistaken, are increasing slightly. So I wouldn't predict that we're going to make it up.
Right, okay.
Anything else? Thank you for that. Moving on to the manager's report.
On the project side of the house, the security project phase 1, the work is underway. Contractors are working. The phase 2 portion of it, the bids are out. They're due back in on February 25th. And we had a eligibility meeting with FAA on the 31st. It went very well. McFarland Johnson's going to be calculating the actual dollar impacts once they get the schedule values for the phase 2 portion. But they're making very strong arguments for us to try to get as much money as possible. The EA/EIS work continues, and we received today final record of decision with the waiver for the phase 2 waiver for taxiway Echo. And I want to say Noah and the consultant, Jed from McFarland, doing a great job moving that forward, and to get that waiver is a significant win for us. So that was very good and helpful. PFC application, FAA continues to review the consultation letter. Fuel farm rehabilitation, we received 90% plans and specs. We reviewed them last week with the consultant and looking to go out to bid. Katie, I'm going to ask you because I think I have a typo here. I had March 21st. I think it's February 21st. In any case, they're due back in on March 25th. Fuel farm. Anyway, I have that later in the report too, so I'll cross-check when I get there. Taxiway Echo, similarly, we received the 90% design specs. The cost estimate is $19.5 million for the project. That will be out on the street March 15th with bids due back on April 16th. Airfield markings that you approved earlier, we're hoping to advertise the bids on March 2nd and have the work completed by May 9th in time for our annual inspection. On the RFP and bid side of the house, the request for expressions of interest for the hangar, as I mentioned before, we received one expression of interest, met with the engineers today. They gave us the what'll work and what won't work where with what hangars, so we're going to circle back to Mr. What's his name? Turner, who proposed building the hangar. We also have received two inquiries beyond the expression of interest date that are interested in building smaller hangars. So once we solidify the larger hangar location with Mr. Turner, we'll most likely be issuing another request for expression of interest. The request for expression of interest for the freight hangar has been developed and will be discussed further at the Long Range Planning Committee. We're looking to maximize the utilization of that facility. We want to make sure it has a freight component, but if they want to do other things in there to make it economically viable, we're open to different ideas. Continuing to work on the post-screening concession opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, we have the draft RFQs for engineering and planning. Fuel farm inspection bids are due in February 25th. And security phase 2 bids are due, the sub bids are February, that's right, they're also due on the 25th. I was reading what the sub bids were. Coming up, we have the bids have to go out then for the markings. Also, Taxiway Echo will be going out to bid, and the fuel farm rehabilitation. On the operations side of the house, we had a meeting with JetBlue last week to go over their summer plans and look at future planning needs. We were scheduled to have a meeting with American that's been postponed. We're working on the transition of our FBO point of sale system. Excuse me. And staff is preparing for our annual CERT inspection, which is scheduled to take place May 11th through the 13th. Also in your packet, you have a draft policy for hard stand assignments. We'd ask you to take a look at that and review it and look for adoption at the next meeting. And we will also have another draft policy for you to review beginning next meeting. This has become critical because we have 5 gates or positions, and sometimes one airline has 4 aircraft on the ground at the same time, and then you have the other 3 airlines. So it's how we're going to be allocating the hard stands and controlling that. Any questions before I go on to statistics?
Anyone?
Okay.
Nope, please move on.
The operations for December were up 34.7% over last December, which is significant. Year to date, they're up 19.4%. GA ramp operations were up 19%. Enplanements were up, well, they're basically about flat or up about 1%. And then year to date, up 6.7%. Cape Air saw a 14% increase in enplanements. Nantucket Air was up 96%, or 428 passengers. Trade winds was up 29%. And in the Boston market, Cape Air had a 25% increase, or 310 passengers. New Bedford traffic continued to dropped by 84 passengers, or 39%. The Hyannis market for December, Cape Air was up 27%, which is only 4 passengers. Nantucket Air was up 96%, or 428, as I mentioned earlier. And overall, the Hyannis market, though, was down 22%, or 258 passengers. In the JFK market, Cape Air increased by 12%, or 16 passengers, and they're starting to build that service. The load factor's coming up, so I think that's working out well. Vineyard traffic continued to decline and was down 65%. On the fuel sales, Jet A gallons sold for December were flat. Year to date, we're still up 2.4%. And for January, they're up 13.18%. Dan, maybe that maybe I can predict it's gonna go up a little more. The avgas was up 22.25% for December, down 1.6 for the year-to-date. And January, they were also down 5.7% roughly. Freight for December was up 3.47 over December last year, but down 0.3% year-to-date. And it's interesting to see when you look at the freight, it fluctuates, but we can't draw any conclusions as to why. Can you go to the next freight one? You can see here where the Cape Air, Postal Service was up 9%, but everybody else was down over last year. So again, we don't know if it's, Christmas shopping has an impact, the new Amazon things that are coming out, or what that is. On the noise side of the house, there were no complaints in December, and in January, they were down from 2 to 1, and again, it was explained there, operating under IFR in VFR conditions.
Any questions or comments on statistics?
I just have a couple of other items. One I want to mention.
Sorry, I had one on statistics, which really struck me and I think is potentially real positive. On the very first page, local operations for the month up to 161. And so, I've heard sort of that there's some guys working on their licenses and whatnot.
There's a lot of that happening.
It's really, really encouraging.
There's a lot of GA and pilot training going on. They're, going through some of the work in the FBO, and I believe it's Stick and Rudder that's coming over with their airplanes. There's a number of folks, some that just bought an airplane. Some local people got together and bought an airplane, and they're taking lessons and flying. So
It's great to see.
it's really booming. Like I said earlier, we have interest in 3 different people who want to build hangars, so that's great news.
Yeah, sure.
I do have a note on the personnel report. Mike O'Neill has announced his retirement. He's been with the airport for over 21 years, and I forgot to get a date. Do you have the date of when they're having coffee and the coffee?
It's 2 weeks from Friday. I mean, is it his retirement, actual retirement?
Yes.
Yes.
That's when the coffee is, 2 weeks from Friday.
Right, and
Yes,
they're having
yeah.
something this Friday.
It's this Friday at the. So yeah, and two weeks from
For
then.
the coffee.
And then the only other item I had on my report was a request for travel to attend the AAAE annual conference May 10th through the 13th, and that I think is in Denver, if I'm not mistaken.
Are there any questions on the personnel report or the airport manager travel?
No?
I move approval of the airport manager travel.
I just had one question. A few minutes ago, you had reported that are those the same dates of our annual inspection, and is that of any concern?
There's some overlap, but I have a great second in command.
Okay.
Wasn't that true last year as well?
I was going to say that, Dan. I thought that occurred last year too, and it actually went very well. So
I can't imagine that either the conference or the inspection is going to move. This motion's been made, and is there a second to approve the travel?
I'll second that.
Mr. Biscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
I vote aye with some reservation because I think that possibly Mr. Rafter should be here for the inspection.
okay. And
I mean,
one
I
thing it
understand
could
you
move
can't
is the
drink-
inspection, and I can double check with the inspector on that.
Yeah, because
Because
one
she
year
did
we
give us
didn't
a
have a
couple
really good report. I'm not saying that you weren't here, but I know
The one
that.
year I was here, so we didn't.
You weren't here that year.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Much better from be away, really.
Maybe, all right,
No,
John.
I will see if that can be changed.
Yeah,
I agree.
okay.
Ms.
And I'm
Blanchard?
not putting Noah down, I'm sorry for that.
And Mr. Drake?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. Commissioners' comments. We have the long-range planning subcommittee meeting that has been rescheduled. Katie, could you help me with that?
It's the February 18th at 9 a.m.
19th, didn't you switch it to the 19th?
I'm sure I have it on my calendar.
Tuesday morning, the 18th.
Yes, Tuesday, the
Okay.
18th, correct, is the next long-range planning subcommittee meeting.
9
And-
a.m. correct?
9 a.m.
At the airport.
airport conference room.
Yes. And that is open to the public. Yeah, and is there any other commissioners' comments?
I have
Mr.
one,
Drake?
Arthur,
Yes.
a sad one, unfortunately, but I know some of you knew him. A former airport commissioner, Dual McIntyre, died on Sunday.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry to hear
After
that.
a very accident and very short illness. And the funeral will be at St. Paul's Church at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning.
Thank
I'm
you
very
for that.
sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I knew Dual pretty well.
There's my neighbor.
Yeah, he's really, really great guy. Sad news for sure. Any other commissioners' comments? Mr. Drake, anything else?
No, thank you.
Public, any additional comments? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session per General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, for the purpose of reviewing the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda for possible review and release. Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding the Gatto claim where the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Walsh, where the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. And Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, where the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Airport Commission, not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Plancer?
Aye.
Mr. Drake?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you.